then I'm going to mute myself and I will leave it to the PNNL folks. Thanks, guys.
Alrighty, well, glad you could all join. In the chat, can you just type in a 1 if you were on our last call? And how about anybody new today? Go ahead and type a 2. All right. All right, I'm going to share documents because we've got a bit of a mix. Let's see. And you should have gotten a link to a box where we had a lot of documents for you. This right now, I'm just sharing the Cyberforce competition, the overview, rules, and scoring. This is the document that will be very valuable to you. And it's got a whole list here of rules and things. What I'm going to jump to, the competition overview, the facility and the scenario. And there's no way you can read it. I'm scrolling way too fast. But where I'm heading towards is the 2 rubrics that we have. So the first one here is the security document rubric. We discussed it last time, and that should be in the recording. You should have a link to that somewhere. And this is, we can go through this if you have questions. The main thing today was to remind you that it's in your rules document, and it shows that for the documentation, we want the list of the asset inventory, your network diagram, known vulnerabilities, and how you were able to identify those. And for the CISO video, we had the following page is, the C-suite panel rubric. Again, identifying everything that needs to be done so that you can achieve an exemplary score. Security documentation, we have a template for you, which I have here. And again, your team ID, we're trying to do all the grading blind so that we don't have any biases for the schools. And again, there's a section for each of the points that were mentioned in, why is it cut off at 2 pages? Oh, maybe I can try to convert this to PDF so it'd be easier to share. The template's actually a little bit longer. So I think I'm going to stop the screen share for now. We'll go back. I see that we've got a question. So today mainly we're trying to focus on questions and answers. So network mapping and software, of course, there's a variety of free tools out there. You're welcome to use any of those. So does that answer your question, Chip? Okay, responding in the chat. So yeah, that's a good point. One of the first things you'll want to do is identify the hosts that you have on your network and all the services that are running. All right. Is there another question? If you don't ask questions, then we're going to start asking some questions.
Yes, you can type your questions into the chat though. So we've got when we do our CISO panel video, are we supposed to approach it from the direction of this is what we want to do, or this is what we've done to the system? So if you look at the scenario on there, that gives you a lot of guidance in regard to that. So David, could you pull that up again? And then maybe Animesh, you can directly address that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a moment. I'll share again.
I can start by answering your question as yes. We'll go and wait for the sheet to be pulled up here.
Okay, so here's the sheet.
You actually want to go to the scenario, David.
Oh, the scenario. Okay. Let's see. How far back do I go?
It should be, wait, you were right there. Go back one.
Oh.
Right there.
Oh, all righty.
Perfect. Okay, so essentially your question, if I understood it correctly, was should we be focusing on things we've already done or things we want to do? And why I say yes is because the first part of your video is going to be, or not first part, but I should say, if you look at step 3 there, David, can you scroll down just a little bit more for me? Thank you. Perfect. So step 3 there, you'll see that we want 3 to 5 immediate actions that you are implementing or have implemented to assess and better secure the system. Step 4 wants you to persuade the CISO, the C-suite for actions that you'd like to see taken. So you will first present things that you either are currently working on or have already done. These are short-term actions, very immediate, low funding type things. So open source, free tools. Then you'll present at least 2 potential long-term. Gotcha. Oh, I gotcha. Okay, so these are not then. Okay. My apologies. Okay. And do you mind elaborating on that then? I apologize.
Sure. So if you look at the background, you already have a system, right? But in addition, Innovo, which that's the system you currently have, the network you already have access to. They've recently acquired this small weather analysis company called Moti, but you're not going to have access to this until Saturday, November 13th, the day of the competition. And you're going to need to integrate it into the network immediately so that Moti's customers continue to have access and they don't even realize what's happened. And then at some point, you're going to also be acquiring these team members of Moti into your infrastructure. So your job here is to discuss your strategy for integration and future security. So you're making the plan for what you're going to do. You don't get to see that Moti's system at all until Saturday. So what are you going to do? What's the first thing you're going to do? How are you going to do the risk assessment? What risks are of concern to you? Because you don't know, you're going in blind. What are you going to check out first? What are the things you need to consider right away? What immediate actions are you going to want to take to make sure that the system is as secure as possible from the first moment, okay? And then what are the things that you're going to do in the future that you have a little bit more time for? So those are the immediate actions that you're going to take to make the assessment and better secure the system. They may be things you don't have to do, but what are the first things you're going to check for, right? And then keep in mind, this is a non-technical audience, right? And then long-term action. So over time, things like, you're going to integrate these other people in. There's other pieces that you are going to want to look at, that sort of thing. So yes, the C-suite panel is not really in reference to what you've already implemented, although you want to make sure it matches. So things you've already implemented, you may be referring to, like, we've already done this, we want to make sure Moti is aligned with. That might be one way that you're talking about something you've already implemented. But you really want to talk about your approach to making sure that that new system, as you integrate it immediately, is secure, and that you're able to further secure the system as you move forward and make sure that it is fully integrated. Does anybody with more technical background want to elaborate for me?
I'll elaborate, but I will apologize. I missed that part of it. So
That's okay. It was different from last year. So this
Yeah.
this is a new scenario, and so we're still getting aligned with it too. So you'll forgive us for having temporary moments of speaking to the past.
Yeah, and as Anne was talking there, I typed into the chat that both what you've done will be covered. That's going to be in your documentation. You'll have several pages to talk about that. And then as Anne and Animesh have explained, your C-suite panel will be what you will do, and you're going to, convince the C-suite that you've got a reasonable plan. Okay.
So we had and this is really an Amanda question. Can we remove users from admin account? Is it against the rules to touch user accounts? So Amanda, I don't know if you're listening still.
I'm listening. As long as it's not the accounts that are clearly outlined in the rules and scoring, then you can remove as you please. But again, as I've stated before, and this is in part for the security documentation, you'll want to identify why you're removing things and not just remove because it's an easy, find and delete. Because at the end of the day, even if it's not for security documentation, Red Team is going to ask you why you deleted that. So that's my answer.
Next question is, how long is appropriate for security documentation? 30 pages, question mark. So I'm going to tell you right off the get-go that if you have 30 pages, imagine if we have scorers that are all having to do 30 pages in, just a couple of days' time. Probably not going to make our scorers very happy.
That's the polite way of saying, please don't do that.
Yeah, 30 pages is probably way overkill. David, would you go to the template and maybe go over a little bit more what would be appropriate there?
Okay. All right, I can switch back over. So here, for some reason, the copy they just downloaded only had part of the template. But the system overview, that's 250 words or less. Again, you're not going to be able to fit 30 pages in there. In fact, that doesn't make sense. The asset inventory is going to be a free form that could end up being a few pages depending upon how many services you have on your hosts. Your hosts are clearly limited. Again, you're not going to get to 30 pages there. And then this, all right, I've got another copy on the side that you won't see. Okay, the network diagram, that's a one-page document as well. Again, the list of the vulnerabilities, that could be somewhat lengthy, but teams have taken and entered the raw output from a vulnerability scanner, and generally that's not received well. If you send us 100 pages of vulnerability scanner reports just crammed into the middle of your document, we will see it and we'll kind of move on, because the point here is that you're presenting this to your immediate manager, or someone else is going to take action, and those raw vulnerability scanner reports, they try and triage a few things, but they aren't that, they're very, very low level.
I'd really like that too long didn't read from those.
Yeah, there's a reason why most of the good scanners have an executive summary at the beginning, because they know most people aren't going to read through all the pages. The system hardening is 1,250 words or less. Clearly, that's not enough to get you to 30 pages either. We will, the judges are going to appreciate, or the scorers are going to appreciate, how well you've gone through and summarized the information for the reader. Okay, so I'm going to try and catch up here. We've got one question on, do you need the exact CVE for a vulnerability? That, for some of those, there's going to be an obvious match. For some, not as much. If you can do it, fine. However, this is an exercise of, we're asking you for way more information than you can reasonably provide us. And so you're going to have to manage your time. And so don't track down all the CVEs and leave one of the sections open. Make sure you have something filled in for every section. Because if it's blank, we can't give you any partial credit at all. We'd like to give you as much partial credit as we can, and ideally, we'd like to give you full credit.
Okay, going to a question that hasn't been answered yet. How are databases accessed for scoring? So I think that's an Amanda question.
Cody, you're going to have to elaborate. I'm not quite certain what you mean by that. We don't score databases, we score services.
That was what I thought, but I figured maybe I was missing something. Should our video presentation contain slides, or is it just a video of us? How many people max should appear in the video? So Animesh, do you want to field that?
My Wi-Fi is cutting in and out.
Oh, I'll take care of it unless somebody else on the team wants to.
If you could type the question in chat, just because it broke up, I can probably handle it.
I got this one. So your video presentation can have slides if you want. In fact, it can be all slides and then your team is talking behind the slides. So you don't necessarily have to show your faces if you prefer not to. You need at least 2 of your team to participate in the actual video, and they need to acknowledge the contributions of other team members to what you're presenting in the video. How did they help put that together so that we see that everybody was involved in that making of that video, that presentation. How many people max? That's up to you. You can have your entire team, every member of your team appear or speak in the video, and you don't have to have slides. You can have just your team members presenting the information to your C-suite, whatever you want in that regard. We want to make it as easy for you to meet those requirements as possible, but we do want you to show that all of your team members have been involved in getting to that presentation. Does that make sense? And then any updates to the rules? We don't anticipate there will be. Correct, Amanda?
The only update is the one that I've sent around, which is that you do not have to build out a DNS service. That was provided out in an email already, but other than that, the rules are set as that.
All right, and then let's see. Okay. And any and all tools that are free and open source are okay to implement in infrastructure to bring more security. That would be true as long as they are free and open source. If we want to make sure that everybody can use the same tools. One team should not have an advantage because you had lots of money to spend and somebody didn't. Amanda, do you need any clarification on that?
Nope, you were 100% right.
Okay. Should we address the new server within the security documentation? You're not going to have access to it before you submit the security documentation, so there's really no way you can do that other than if you wanted to put something in your system hardening, but it's not a requirement.
Yeah, you could put a placeholder with a TBD or something like that to acknowledge that it's going to be there, but that, as Ann said, you're not going to be able to say much about it because you won't see it until the day of.
Right.
I was going to go back to share the screen again and bring up the rubric. So about the CVE question. So the rubric is your friend. The initial answer that I gave, it would be nice to have that, the CVEs, but as I'm looking through here an exemplary, there's no CVEs mentioned in the system overview. In the asset inventory, CVE isn't mentioned. Same with network diagram, the known vulnerability. And then, as we go through system hardening, so in that sense, you're kind of off the hook, but under the professionalism, some of those CVEs are well known. So we'd expect the Stellar team to be aware of CVEs, that they exist and that there are mitigations for those. But yeah, we have created this rubric. We aren't going to change this rubric. This is how we're going to do the grading.
It never hurts to go above and beyond.
Oh, absolutely.
As long as you don't overkill and try and make us read 30 pages. Remember, scorers are people too.
Yes.
And we have a lot more to score than you have to do.
So again, this is, if you get everything done, tomorrow, and you just have too much time on your hands, then fill in all those extra details. But I suspect, I was a student once, I don't think I ever had too much time. There was always some other assignment I had to work on.
So we have our scoreboard has been scanning for the last 2 hours, and only 3 services are required for scoring, apparently. Amanda?
Sorry, say that again. I'm also troubleshooting help desk here.
It says our scoreboard has been scanning for the past 2 hours, by the way, and only 3 services are required for scoring, apparently. Question mark.
We haven't implemented all the services to show. So once we get that done, they'll show it. So you still got plenty of time, people. So once we get that going, you'll get there.
And then was yesterday's fireside chat recorded?
Yes. Once I get everything that's in there. Do that.
And I guess, is there a link coming? So you'll be posting that, right?
Yes, once this one is done.
Okay. They'd like to know when they're getting access to Castle.
Dear Lord, people, this is a security documentation and C-suite panel. That'll happen here shortly as well.
Let's see. The other 2 questions are also for you, Amanda. Windows 2016 servers untouchable, meaning no hardening necessary.
Correct.
And then the purpose of the one-on-one meeting with the red team before competition day.
The purpose of the one-on-one is 1, to check in that you're actually still participating, and 2, then you'll be provided the credentials to the Windows 2016 box.
There you go.
That is what OD is. So.
All right. Other questions specifically related to C-suite or security documentation? Now, for those of you who were not here the last time, we will once again reiterate that the scorers are people too. Following the guidelines we've provided will make their lives easier and consequently will result in a more accurate score for what you submit. We do our best. We have a lot of volunteer scorers, and they will do their best. We do our best to train them. And we do our best to back up their scores to verify that they've followed the rubrics. You can help to make that more possible by following the guidelines, staying with the template, making sure that you're looking at the rubric, and basically giving us what we asked for. The easier you make it on the scorers, the more accurate your score can be. And for those of you hoping for that top prize, this is key. A few points can make a huge difference.
And I'll emphasize what Anne said. your professor will say, we'll leave this as an exercise for the reader, or you've maybe seen that in a paper. You don't want there's a limited time for the volunteers to score these documents. They will not have an hour to comb through every single word piece by piece to build up the story that you could have told them. So in the documentation and in the video, you need to tell the panel or the scorers that you have completed all the goals. So again, on the documentation, you're going to be able to have words in each of those sections, but just double check that, if it calls out for listed hosts, that you've got all the hosts listed. But yeah, tell the reader what they're going to see, and then that way they will be aware of it and they will know that, you should get that exemplary score. The same thing, when you put together the rough outline for your video, go back to the scoring, well, actually to the scenario. And as Animesh went through, there were those 4 points that you're supposed to address. Now, include your registration ID. It's very simple, but you'd be surprised year over year that some of those really simple things are missing. And then the judges have to work harder and a team might miss out on points.
All right, David, there's the question here that says we have around 150 controls we implemented for specific weaknesses. We think this is too many for the documentation, but are looking to score the highest. And Amanda has advised them that it's up to them to decide what the balance is when listing those in documentation. They'd like if they can get any additional guidance on how much is too much, and this is for known vulnerabilities. So you can see, I'm gonna speak ahead of David here, that in the rubric, it says that if you've identified greater than 22 of the vulnerabilities provided, that's gonna at least get you a 3, and then identified most is going to be above. So, 22, above 22 to 150, there's a big gap there, right?
Well, and this is some nuances. I'm trying to think about the question itself. They're asking about controls. And so NIST 800-53's got what, 500-600 controls. I purposely try not to remember how many because it's there's a lot of them. And if you implement all those controls, you can be somewhat reasonable that there won't be a vulnerability in your system. And we know from past experience that there's going to be some backdoor account. This is a hint for all the teams listening in today, where some, it's probably not going to be named, Mr. or Mrs. Bad Guy, but there'll be some account with a, perhaps even a missing password. That would be a vulnerability that you would list in the documentation, that you identified a rogue account and that it was not needed for any of the scoring engines, that the rules did not state that it had to be left untouched, and therefore you removed it. You're not going to find 150 of those kinds of vulnerabilities that have been seeded by the team. But the controls themselves, yeah, you could easily implement 150 controls. You can implement, hundreds more. So if you're looking at, you've got 100 or so that you've identified, then go ahead and, lump them into groups and say that, you've got 150 controls. If you say that 35 were from, now I'm trying to, let's see, I'm drawing a blank on the NIST cybersecurity framework categories. If you were to say that, 15 of those were from identify, 37 were from protect, defend, you could tell us that you have enumerated them, you have assigned them to bins, and that provides confidence for us that you know what you're talking about. It provides that summary that a manager would appreciate without going into all of the detail. And that's how I would, bin those into groups, tell us that you know that you've done your due diligence. And Yeah, especially with, because the system hardening, that's 1,250 words. You're not going to be able to detail all of those controls, but you can enumerate them. Say that you've got 150 that are there, that list your top 5. Removing backdoor passwords might be one of those. Maybe it doesn't make your top 5 or your top 10. Does that help, Ashton?
One of the things to consider, I'm sure that all of you have heard from an English teacher somewhere, to have somebody review your material before you submit. Same thing here, hand it to somebody and just say, all I want is for you to tell me if I'm hitting the right mark compared to this rubric, or if there's something I need to look at again. Just get somebody else's perspective on whether you've gone too far or not far enough on trying to meet those objectives in the rubrics. On the video, basic thing like making sure that it plays from the link you submit is really important. All right, we got thanks for the answer. Can we expect that the white team will change our current hardening implementation or create vulnerabilities in our environments?
I'm not sure how to parse that question, because the white team, those are the people that are scoring your documents. We're not going to have access inside the infrastructure. There is a separate sub-team that has created the default accounts and services, that has stood up your virtual networks for you, if you will. They have implemented several vulnerabilities in those systems, and I do not believe that they will be in your systems. Once those were turned over to you, they're yours. And Amanda can correct me if I'm wrong, but once you have them, they're yours, and no one will mess with them until the red team gets a chance to go in and have some fun. Is that correct, Amanda?
Yep.
Okay.
So I don't see any new questions yet. So while you're thinking of them, I'm going to ask you to type in the chat what you think your team will be strongest at for this competition. Hand waving. It's a good one. Comical answers are always appreciated. Winning, I can't say. How hard the 2016 server is. My team will be strong scorers. Thank you, David. Pretty new team, not strong at anything, but my team can bring fun for sure. So strong at fun. And Lisa wants to know who's got the market on dank memes, because that's her favorite thing. Please send them to her. And our team would be strongest at implementing VMs or learning how to break them. Oh, yeah, no dank memes allowed in Discord yet. So true. Otherwise, probably T23. Principle of least privilege, Lisa. Sorry. All right.
Yeah, we do separation of duty. We allow Lisa to take over meme control for us. She's just very strong at that.
I need more for my files. Please feed me.
All right. Any other questions, especially on security documentation or C-suite video? We know these things are keeping you up at night, and we want to give you the opportunity to sleep well. If you haven't gone through the rubric, I would be racing through it right now to see if I had any questions. What are the most common mistakes previous teams have made? Oh, not following the rubric is the most common. Oh my gosh.
Well, I'm thinking last year, was it like a third of the teams didn't submit anything?
Yep. They weren't
And,
teams, they were individuals last year, but yes.
and if you don't submit, you're guaranteed a 0.
Mhm.
If you submit something, then the judges have an opportunity to take compassion on you and score you a 1, and the 1 in each category is still better than a 0.
We are benevolent dictators.
Yes. So, yeah, read the rubrics. You know, we've asked these questions for a reason, as this is a learning experience for you. And as I'll just go back to, there are hints. So let me go back to the.
Well, David's looking at that. Yes, using Zoom to record your C-suite video is just perfect. That works just fine. The other options are available as long as we can make it play. That's what we want to be able to do. You do not have to be in the same place. You can be at separate places, especially considering whatever protocols you may be following in your area of the world. Will you know where you scored in relation to the other teams? Yes, you will have that information after the competition. You will have some general idea throughout the competition, but you will get the information about generally where you scored at the end. Will there be a hardening training offered prior to the competition? Not that I'm aware of. David?
I'm not aware of that.
Although I will say we do appreciate teams that are willing to give hints to other teams. Sportsmanship is always appreciated. Remember that when it comes to cybersecurity, just because I make myself more secure, if you're insecure, that doesn't help me much, because you can be a link into me.
But going back to the rubrics and such, and the template, we try and provide hints, as to the purpose for why, we have these sections there. The system overview is to let people know what's in your system, if you will. And then, we had in the past, some people, list the names of the hosts and port numbers and things in the overview. And senior management they don't care about that. They know that stuff exists. So, this year we, upgraded this section with a hint to help you to write it well. So this overview is something that you can show your roommate or a classmate, and they can look at it and say, oh, okay, no, that makes sense. So we do try and give you the hints, and like I said, go back to the rubrics. That's where we've tried to communicate as best we can to you as to what we value and what you're going to score points on. These are they're 1 page each, so we don't have all the details in there. So as Anne was saying before, and I believe as Animesh has hinted at as well, if you can go above and beyond and you're on the border, then, we have a little bit of discretion. Is it a 3+ or 4-? We can, if you've done well and it's not necessarily on the list, we will take that into consideration and try and bump you up when we can. But the biggest mistakes, it's not answering the questions within the sections, not answering the ask of the video, or just flat out not turning anything in. That's, if you've only got an hour, then, set a timer and write as fast as you can for an hour and call it good. And we'll still read it, and we'll be happy to read it and score it. So question on, can you get a perfect score in documentation?
We had a couple last year.
I think so. I mean, that's where the final review will come in. But yeah, we've had several teams do exceedingly well across all of them. Not uncommon for some teams to get perfect scores in some areas and miss it, on another. But by and large, I would say the majority of the teams have done well. You can tell who some of the new teams are, or who some of the teams of your freshman students are versus your juniors and seniors. You just have a lot of these things. It's all about practice. The more you write, the better writer you will become.
Other questions? And that can be a fun pop question from our staffers to the teams as well.
Well,
do you accept bribes? Accept them? Sure. Will they make a difference? No.
We can't solicit a bribe. And because we're all remote, you can't bring us dark chocolate. We're not going to give up our home addresses, so we've got limits there. Oh, passion fruit would be good too.
Passion fruit. Or dank memes.
Yes. All right. So several of us at PNNL, we're Washington State. So the dilemma that we always have here is cats or dogs, cougars or huskies. So does anybody want to weigh in on,
Dogs. Dogs are winning so far. That's the only vote. Oh, there's the Cougs. Another vote for dogs. A boo.
Okay, so David, you're going to have to give us your alternate.
Go Bears. All right.
Okay, Bears. All right.
Husky. Yep. And this is why we tell you not to put your university or any reference to your mascot or anything else down, because that can be a positive or negative impression depending on who's looking at your material. Want to keep it as implicitly biased, as much implicit bias out of it as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, the rest of you just don't have a preference? No dogs or cougs? So who grades the documentation? Both documentation and C-suite we have a range of volunteers who will look at it and score it, but every single one of those will be looked at by at least one of the staff members as well. Mm-hmm. We also carefully look if we get 2 volunteers that score something vastly differently. It's very important. We do as much as we can to make sure that there's integrity of your scores. Yes, Ducks and Beavers. Go Ducks.
Oh, your biases are slipping now.
Yeah.
And I never knew.
I'm a duck and a coug. I'm a duck and a coug.
Cognitive dissonance. And I'm a cougar and a dog, but I was only a dog for a year.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was a duck longer than I was a coug, unless you include high school where I was also a cougar. Yeah. But our colors were green and gold there, and they were green and gold at University of Oregon. So I'm just confused. And this week it's Go Braves in honor of my great-grandfather.
Back to the volunteers, we do have professionals that are grading this. So we have reached out to the national laboratories. We also have others from industry. We might very well have some officers from the military services that will be grading as well. Oh yes, professionals in quotes. Professional means that you're drawing a paycheck. So all of you in a few years will be professionals as well.
Lisa's pretending to be an adult. Depending on the moment of the day, she pretends better sometimes than others.
Yes.
You see how it's going right now.
Yeah, someday I'll find out what I will be when I grow up. But so yeah, and then as Anne said, we will have several people look at your documents. If there is a disparity between the scoring, then those will be flagged for review so that we can resolve that.
Adulting is highly overrated.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage cheating? You mean if we catch somebody cheating, what's going to happen? Okay, well, first of all, we're going to go to Amanda, who gets to say over everything, but you can be assured that if we were to find evidence of cheating, we would make sure it was reviewed and the score would be definitely impacted. But Amanda would have the final say on what the overall impact would be for the competition. Putting it all on you, Amanda.
Let's start off with, let's not cheat.
Yep.
Number one. Number two, I have to start off with that. Number one, let's not cheat. Number two, if it's found to be cheating, one, we'll define what that cheating looks like. How does it impact the scores? That can be terms up to disqualification on this competition, as well as not being asked back for future years for that school and or the people on the team in volunteer capacities and whatnot. So what would be considered as cheating and what's the scope? I mean, if that's the question, that's probably a bigger problem, I think. So in essence, in a large scheme, there are some of you on a blue team and you may have students from your school on red. There might be alumni on red or on green or working as a scoring assistant. So scope of this is your job as a blue team member, as a student, do your job. If you have a professor, if you have someone that's working on red, let them do their job. Don't interfere. Look at it as a permanent marker line. There should be no communication in regards to what you're doing. They should not be providing any information on what they're doing. I know what Red's doing. The lab staff know what Red's doing. We also know what your job as blue team is. So if I find that there is some commingling of that, that is considered cheating. And that will be grounds for disqualification. So there's scope right there.
Yeah, collaboration is a good thing. We have to collaborate as professionals, but if we see two identical documents, clearly that's too much collaboration.
That's not collaboration, that's copy.
Yes, thank you, Anne.
Likewise, going and asking for somebody to help you understand something you haven't done before would be different than asking someone to do it for you, right?
Oh.
Sure, you can ask others for pointers on where to start using Discord. Sure, you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate when students reach out to one another, and we especially appreciate when one team or student provides some direction for others that are new, because this is a learning opportunity as well. Having someone do it for you is not appropriate. Asking for guidance on where to start, where to look for resources, you do that in the professional world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at this point in your careers, it's unreasonable to expect that you are both Windows and Linux experts that could set up, either a Linux box or a Windows box with ease. So going to someone in your department or your university IT shop and saying, hey, how do I do this? Or going to Stack Overflow or any of these other, Discord, and saying, what are some recommendations? Perfectly acceptable, because we don't know all the answers. That's part of the job of being a professional, is knowing how to find the answer.
Caleb, you do not have to take your video down after the 16th, but it must be available through the 16th. It's up to you how long you leave it up.
Mhm. And ideally, you'll be proud enough of your documentation in your videos that you might consider putting those in a portfolio that you might need for school or for an interview.
And by the way, Google searching is not cheating. Google searching to understand how to do stuff is not cheating.
Yeah, it's
Copying something word for word is cheating, but don't copy stuff word for word from the internet for documentation thinking that's going to get you points.
yeah, and I mean, this scenario that we're giving, it's unique. You're not going to find lots of answers elsewhere. So in that sense, we're not too, not too worried about it. And we expect that you're all professionals trying to get professional degrees. So.
Let's see, can we make video and presentation public to other students of my school who may want to participate in the future in a future competition? Each year's scenario is completely different. Amanda, do you see any problem with that? I don't.
No, not at all. People
in fact, it might encourage somebody to participate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, please share, let the other students know that this is a wonderful career field to go into, recruit them. And for the GitHubs, I'm not sure how to answer that.
He's making a joke. Ashton, yeah, you don't want to do it. You don't want to give points to other people. Just point them in the same direction, in the right direction. Don't tell them what's out there. You're trying to win or at least score better than them. And recommended tools to build the network diagram.
There are, I think, was it diagrams.net, draw.io?
I think draw.io is migrated to diagrams.net.
Okay.
That's the best open source one that I have found. However, I will take a hand-drawn, well-done network diagram over a random mishmash of circles and squares every day of the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're focused on the content, and we've seen some pretty diagrams that have been information or devoid of information, that those don't score well. So go back to what we asked for on the diagram, which is your listing of hosts, services, a notion of all host network appliances and services should be identified. And as mentioned, if your university is a Microsoft shop, you might have access to a Visio. So there's, like I said, variety of tools. MS Paint, Draw, PowerPoint. I think we've seen some PowerPoint diagrams.
Content and legible. That's really what matters.
Yeah, content.
I've seen some really good hand-drawn ones, and they were circles and squares, but they conveyed the network very well. And last time I gave them full points for that.
Yeah. We will not discriminate against hand-drawn diagrams. And again, if you go back to the rubric, it doesn't say anywhere that that it has to be done with this, that, or the other tool.
As I posted, Google has a free tool. I think it's diagrams.net, but you can Google and find the free Google tool for drawing diagrams.
Mm-hmm.
And I only recently learned of it, and it actually had more flexibility than a lot of the other free ones. Other questions? Last call for questions. Can somebody tell me the date that your C-suite video is due, the date and time that it is due by? What's the time? So I got an 11/9, what time? Anybody? Oh, nobody knows the time. 11:59, what time zone? Pacific time is best, and it is specifically Pacific Standard Time since we fall back this upcoming weekend. And when is the documentation due? Anybody? Documentation, due date and time. Nobody knows when the documentation's due? Come on, y'all. Same, exactly. So you have a busy weekend ahead of you. Plan accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Remind other teams on Discord, do them a favor, say, I'm giving you a hint. Stuff is due on Tuesday. Yes, that extra hour. You get a whole extra hour. Look at that. We planned it that way. Unless you're in one of those parts of the country that doesn't fall back or move forward or anything. All right. 2 minutes left. I think we are done. Thank you all for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Good luck to everybody. You will all do great.